Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our session. This session is how to treat the terms and conditions with TLC at the departmental level. My name is Angela Valencia, and I'm with the University of Arizona. And our speakers today are Lisa Ellen and Kristen Heck from Arizona State University. And they will be introducing themselves in just a few minutes. I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. You probably all know this since we're on day 2 of our conference, but just very briefly. The technical support, I recommend writing the number down in case you have any issues during the session. The session is being recorded and it will be available within a few days. It will be posted to the website, and both the recordings and the PowerPoint will also be available, both of those items. Closed captioning is enabled, so you will have that option on your screen. We do ask that you keep yourself muted while not speaking, but you are free to post any questions via chat, and Lisa and Kristen will address it at the end of the session. And then we also recommend that you, if you can, that you close any other applications or minimize your windows so that you can enjoy the session completely. We do have a survey at the end of the session, and once you exit the meeting, a Zoom window will pop up and you should be able to click on the link. But if that doesn't work, you can copy and paste it in your browser, and that way you can complete it. If you can take it, it doesn't take too long to complete, 2 to 3 minutes. We would really appreciate so that we can get better for next time. So we can go to the next slide. And here we have the land acknowledgement statements. As you all know, our three institutions acknowledge that we occupy land and territories of Indigenous communities. So we've listed here the specific statements from each of our institutions for your education and awareness. So with that, I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our session this morning on how to treat the terms and conditions with TLC at the department level. My name is Lisa Allen. I'm the Associate Director for Research Advancement here in the College of Health Solutions at Arizona State University. I've been working in the field of research administration for a little over 18 years. And in my current position, I have oversight over pre and post award.
Hi, I'm Kristen Heck. Thank you for joining us today. We're very happy to be here and excited to have you all here as well. I'm also with the Arizona State University. I'm a research advancement principal in CHS, so the College of Health Solutions, on the pre-award side. I've been with ASU now for about 1.5 years. Before that, I actually worked at the Arizona Department of Education as the grants fiscal director, where I oversaw all the grants that we sent out to our school districts and charter schools. So a little bit different of work here, but excited to be here.
Okay, let's just get right into it. So the reason why we put this presentation together is that oftentimes we know that we have terms and conditions that need to be communicated to the PIs. And I will pause to say that majority of you probably don't need to be in this session today, because all of your PIs read their notice of awards like from front to back, and all the terms and conditions from front to back. And so if you don't need to be here, maybe there's another session. We know that's not the case. That's why this is an important session, because we've developed a system that we feel works very succinctly in breaking down those terms and conditions for the PI when we have an award come through. So some of the terms and conditions that we definitely need to be aware of at the beginning of the award to make sure there's seamless management of it across the life cycle of that grant is terms such as cost share commitments. Those need to be communicated up front. We need to ensure that they're tracked throughout the life cycle of the project so that we have no issues. Unusual termination clauses, for instance. Are there unreasonable termination clauses in there, or clauses that we need to be mindful of? The PIS is working through the project with his project personnel, so they can plan accordingly. What about carry forward approval? Carry forward, is it allowed or is it automatic? We want to flush that out and make sure that the PIs and the project personnel are aware of those requirements as well. E-Verify requirements, are they listed in the terms and conditions, meaning that project personnel, anybody working on that project needs to be verified that they can work in the United States. And so we want to make sure that that's covered and that we have appropriate people working on that project. Is there going to be some type of disengagement from the project? And kind of breaking that down, if they're going in our major research portfolios with NIH, there may be other sponsors, but sometimes there's terms and conditions in there about what if the PI needs to reduce effort or any other senior project personnel need to reduce their effort. Is prior approval required? In most cases, yes. In this case of NIH, like or some federal grants, 25% or more reduction in key personnel will require prior approval. And also about restriction and rebudgeting. We need to understand those requirements as well. We all know typically that one instance is not allowed is rebudgeting from participant support costs to some other line item. We want to communicate that to PI so they can plan accordingly. Oh, what happened? All right. All other terms and conditions that we want to be mindful of are restrictions and rebudgeting more than X% based on the sponsor's requirements. We oftentimes will see 10% floated out there. If you're trying to rebudget between cost categories or line items more than 10%, typically prior approval is required. What are the intellectual property rights? We want to be alert the PI if there's any type of requirements in there as far as disclosing the project outcomes, or in terms of any type of products that will come out of this research. How is that to be handled? Looking at any export controls or ITAR regulations that might apply. Is there any type of technology or sensitive information or knowledge that's going to be transferred to a foreign person, entity, or country? We want to be mindful of that. Utilization of small business concerns. Is it required that the PI reach out to small businesses, whether it be minority-owned business, women-owned businesses, or other small businesses as a requirement of the grant? So we want to have that flushed out as well. What about property ownership? How is that handled? At the end of the grant, major equipment, where is that rest? Who will own that at the end? And in some cases, we want to be specifically aware that even though items such as laptops might typically qualify as supplies and to some sponsors, other sponsors will consider laptops to be equipment. So how is a laptop disposition at the end of a grant? And all kinds of other prior approval requirements. We want to make sure that those are PIs are aware of those. Choice of law, which state state. In most cases, that's laws are going to be required to be adhered to during the course of that grant. Typically, ASU is very good. Our Office of Research Sponsored Projects very good at redlining and ensuring that all of the terms are fair to us as far as publication rights and restrictions. So, but if there are in there, we need to make sure that the PI is aware of those restrictions as well. So, that leads us into some of the other things and connecting the dots. So, Kristen.
All right. So we start the lovely TLC at the pre-award stage. So anytime that we have API come to us and saying we want to do a submission, the first thing that the RA is going to do is review all of the funding announcement, everything that we need to review in regards to that, to assure there isn't any special terms and conditions that we need to be communicating up front that could impact the development of the proposal and the budget. So we do work with them on that. And then what we do after we've reviewed that, we go through, if it is awarded, we do have a meeting. We call it our pre to post handoff. And that is actually where we loop in our post-award team. So the post-award RA, that's going to be helping out that PI, the PI, and then the pre-award RA. And we all meet and we go over their notice of award or their agreement with the PI and the post-award team. So we're all on the same page and they understand exactly all of any nuances or anything special that we need to make sure is highlighted for them during that meeting.
And so as Kristen mentioned, the post-award team is represented during that meeting. their part in discussing it would be, how is the cost share being managed, that ensure that that's being tracked, if it's applicable to that grant, that they've reached out to the appropriate other units to set up a connection between the main grant and the cost share account. What are the invoicing needs? Some cases that we may have to have PI involvement in invoicing, and that, there may be situations where it's based on some deliverables, those types of things. Procurement, we talked about small business concerns earlier. How do you procure? How do you purchase? How do you make a purchase or get reimbursed for something? Those types of things. Is it a fixed price versus cost reimbursable? We want to ensure that PI is aware of that at the onset, so they know how we will manage any residual funds. But typically, we be mindful that we want to utilize the funds based on the reasonable budget that was submitted up front. So hopefully that won't be the case, and that they're utilizing their funds all for the project as specified. Is it carry forward? If so, will it be separate accounting? Sometimes we can decipher that in the terms and conditions, how that's going to be managed. So that can help with the year-to-year transitions. And also to inform PIs, if in fact that he or she perceives there may be a need for no cost extension request, how to manage that, how to communicate that to us so that we can get that handled. We're going to transition at this point to go into a our what we call our portfolio, new portfolio or kickoff document. Kristen, as a pre-award principal and member of the pre-award team, she is pretty much in this document day to day, so she's going to cover the majority of it. I will say that at some point we're going to have you have some input in this session as well. So with that said, we do have a brainstorming question for you to consider, and you can actually put it in the chat. What do you do, or how do you disseminate the terms and conditions at your institution? What have been the successes or challenges you've experienced related to dissemination of the terms and conditions? So any time during this session, you can plug in the chat. We will look at those a little bit later as we get through this session.
All right, so we're going to start talking about our new award portfolio. So this is a document that we created to help when a grant is awarded. So the first thing that we do is when we get that award notification, the pre-award RA goes through and reads that lovely document that we get. So we know those documents can sometimes be 5 pages, sometimes be 50 or 60 pages, and a bunch of legal jargon and contract language. And so I know probably for most people, that's something that you would want to read to help put you to sleep. For me, I enjoy reading those things. So we do go and we read that document thoroughly, and we start filling out this form. So the first page of this form goes over just the general grant information that we have in regards to the award that we have just gotten. So we put in the grant title, we put in the sponsor name, and then who the PI is, if there's any co-investigators. We give them the funding proposal number, so that way the principal investigator has that. They get the ASU award number, our sponsor award number, and then the appropriate grant account numbers. And then we do note what type of agreement it is, because we get a bunch of different ones that could come in. We note the period of performance. We know what kind of award type it is, if it's federal, state, internal funds. And then we do note the total award. And if there is a first funding increment, we note that for the PI as well. Also with that, we're going to put the pre-award RA that's been helping through that proposal development. Their information will go here along with the post-award RA information. And then if we put in the HR support for hiring as well. So this is kind of a nice page for them to have just the general information regarding their grant award that they've just gotten. So ultimately, this document is supposed to be like a one-stop shop for the PI that they can always go back and forth and look at when they do need to look at it. And it gives them all of that pertinent information, because I know a lot of times they're not going to remember that information. They have lots of other stuff on their plate that they're doing. So the next part of the document, we get into award characteristics. So we do note if there's going to be a no cost extension necessary. So we do ask the PI. So while after we fill this out, there are some things throughout this document and that meeting that we're going to be getting from the PI, and then we're going to document it in this document accordingly. The first thing is we ask if they think they're going to have a no cost extension. They may not know right away, and that's okay. So we just mark accordingly. And then we also note the no cost extension deadline for them. So that way they have a place where that's at. So if they ever need to remember where it is, they can just go to this document and find it. Then the next thing we note is if the carry forward is going to be automatic. So we do make sure we check that. And then we note if there's going to be a request that is required. So that way the PI knows if they're going to have to go in and make that request when it comes to that time. We also note anything on intellectual property. So we know Uniform Grant Guidance 200.448 does have specific federal requirements in regards to intellectual property. However, not all of our grants are federal, and sometimes we can see additional restrictions that are on top of the federal restrictions when we do have a federal award. So we do note that, and what we do is we look at the agreement. We note the page number for them, so that way they're not having to search through that agreement. They can come to this document and be like, I need information on intellectual property. Perfect, it's on page 5, and they can just go to page 5 and read that. And then if there's anything that we need to highlight that we see is very important that we want to make sure the PI is aware of, we do note that in the notes section as well. And then also for prior written approval requirements. So we know federal law does have prior written approval. Lovely Uniform Grant Guidance, which we like to refer to as UGG, so 2 CFR 200.407 does have prior written approval requirements, where we do know these are certain things that we have to go to the federal agency to get that prior written approval. So we do mark that. And then we also look at the agreement and make sure there's nothing special in the agreement. In addition to those prior written approval requirements, we mark the page numbers, and then we also put the notes for them as well.
Okay, so I'm going to break for a second to say a couple of comments because I'm seeing some things coming in the chat. I will say, as I had mentioned in the session on Tuesday, that whatever holiday you celebrate is going to come early for you, whether it be your birthday or whatever holiday, because we are going to share this with you. So you can take this and make it your own. It has been invaluable for us. We know that there are, before we implemented this, it was a situation where we have these sit down meetings, but we really walked away with no formal document. It was all verbal, or it was like us making notes or whatever, you know, and that was not like very productive. And it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't affirming in any way to the integrity of the project. So that's why we painstakingly went through and developed this so that we could make it easier for ourselves, make it easier for our PIs. And actually, this is meant to be what I would call a living document during the life cycle of the grant. But if the PI files this away and goes back to this, they will get one for each of their grants. If they go back to this file for that particular grant, everything they need is here. So they don't have to go hunting for anybody. They don't have to go hunting for anything. Of course, we're here for them, but it's meant to be a document that they carry with them through the life cycle of that grant. And then the other question was about how do you typically handle award documents that do not clearly mention carry forward? Well, we will mention that during the portfolio meeting, the kickoff meeting. If that's something that the PI foresees, then of course we can always go back to the sponsor to get clarity on that. However, I think we would need to assume that it's not something that we can request if it's not addressed. However, we will clarify that with the sponsor if the PI foresees that may be a need at some point down the road.
All right, so the next part of the document is the research integrity and assurances. So this is where we note that they have the approval of the RAB protocol, so human subjects are ICOOK, so animals, and IBC protocol. So we do make sure that they have received those necessary approvals for those protocols. And if there's anything special in there that needs to be noted, we do also have the notes there as well. And then you can also see, and as we go through this document, you're going to see the lovely little links in blue. So these are links that actually they're resources for the principal investigator. So that way, if they need information on policies or whatever regarding that specific section of this document, they can just go directly to that link. So they don't have to go searching for that as well. So we just want to make this as easy as possible for the principal investigator to find that information without having to search stuff, because sometimes that can be time consuming to find what you need.
a little levity here. This slide here makes me laugh because I'm like, okay, so we don't go over this at the pre to post kickoff meeting, then I can visualize all kinds of human participants and animals running all over campus, you know, just doing their thing. But no, typically we know that our PIs are very mindful of the requirements that are required of their grant. However, we want to flesh out this part because we know that if the IRB protocol has not been approved, or we're in some type of pending status, that typically funds are not released for certain components of those grants. So we want to make sure that they're aware of those aspects as well.
All right, so the next section we have is where we mark any foreign components. So we do mark if there's a foreign element, such as travel. If there is travel and we know the country, we are going to note it there and note if it is restricted, and we make any notes that are important for the PI to be aware of. And again, we do have those resources for the PI that they can always go to when it comes to anything regards to foreign elements and foreign components. And then the next section we get into is publications. So this is where we note if there's any publication restrictions, and then we do note the details of those restrictions here too for them. And then we get into conflict of interest. So this is something that we do ask the PI during this meeting. We ask them if they have any conflict of interest that applies. And then we do double check if they do, if the COI management plan has been approved or if it has not been approved. And then there's the resources for them in regards to the COI information that they can easily access if they need more information on that. And then we get into reporting deliverables. So most of our grants that we see do have some sort of reporting deliverables as part of the agreement. So we do note these here for them. So if there's any annual or interim reporting, we do note any of those reporting deliverables that they're going to have, regardless of what they are. And then we note what the final reporting deliverables are as well. And then we go in and we do take either from the specific aims or from the scope of work, any project deliverables that they are going to have to meet through the grant as they are running that grant and managing that grant. And then we come down to budget characteristics. So this is where we get into budget revision. So of course, we are hoping at the pre-award stage that they're budgeting as exactly what they need. But from the time that it is, you know, they submit that proposal to the time that's awarded, they could identify that stuff needs to be changed. And we know per uniform grant guidance that there are requirements around budget revisions. So we do ask them in this meeting if they do anticipate any budget revisions, so we can kind of have a heads up. So that way the post-award RA is aware that there could be a budget revision coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, Kristen. In addition to the document here, Kristen had mentioned earlier that we make them aware of who their assigned post-award RA is. If you do have the capacity to do so, even if you have a contact person, one contact person for that PI, we find that makes it so much easier for them. At one point, it was more like a ticket system where they could, you know, put in a request, but then any one of a number of people would manage that request of those different tasks. Where now we have somebody that is assigned to them that will see them through the life cycle of that grant, as long as they're with ASU or with our college. And so they develop a relationship with that person. There's a trust factor there. And we find that just is so much helpful. As we're onboarding new team members right now, part of our onboarding process is that we're not waiting for the team members to be fully trained in here. We're actually making them the contact person. We know that coming in, the bare minimum is that they can actually track tasks. So they're starting to develop that rapport with that PI, and we have more of a team approach with the onboarding so that they're getting firsthand on experience working directly with that PI, whom ultimately would be the person that they're assigned to when they're independent.
All right, so the next section we do note is any position accounting. So most of our grants, we do see effort on the grant for the PI and other personnel. So we do get this information and we discuss this during that pre to post meeting. And that's, you know, a big part of where post award does come in as well. So that way post award is aware if there's any position accounting updates that do need to be done. So we do note those here. We note if it is required, the personnel name, the percentage of effort that was budgeted, and then what the adjustment period is going to be. We do that for all the applicable personnel. And that way the post award RA and the PI know that this is something that they're going to need to work through since the grant is awarded.
And typically what happens after this kickoff meeting, the kickoff is the pre to post coming together, but We would have the PI to meet with their assigned post-award RA, probably in the few coming weeks after this meeting, to actually look at their forecasting. They'll start forecasting out their budget, and also reconfirm the allocations that need to happen here as far as position mapping for the various positions. So that's when they can also set up their periodic or routine meetings from that stage.
So the next section we get into is cost share. So if there is cost share, we do note that here. It is not something we see very often, but it is something that can potentially come up. We do note any of the cost descriptions, like what those costs are, and then the total dollar amount. And then again, we have all those resources here for the PI. So if they do need to go and look for any of those, they have easy access to them. And then the next part we get into is consultants. So during the pre-award stage, as an RA, we do, wherever we can, make sure we list those consultants. And so we do list them here on this document. We mark if there's consultants, we give their name, their email, so their contact information, the total cost that we have budgeted, the period of performance that is anticipated for that specific consultant. And then we do note if they are named on the proposal. I would say 99% of the time that they are, but if they're not, we are also going to note that as well. And we have enough spaces here, so that way if they have several consultants, we can make sure we get them all in there.
And we will also take the opportunity to discuss with them implications of budget revisions, and how if they had someone budgeted as a subcontractor and now they're trying to look at that person as being a private consulting, how that will impact their budget, and if that is even appropriate. We do a whole, even though we're going over this, we're also having a very lively discussion with them. So it's really a more of a yes, it's terms and conditions, but it's also a opportunity for us to have a very vivid discussion with them about key aspects, and it's an educational piece more than anything. So it's really been helpful.
So in the next section, so we definitely note consultants. So we want to also make sure we are noting our subcontracts as well. So we do go in there and note any of the subcontracts, the institution, the PI's name, their email. We give them the grant account number for that subcontract, and then the period of performance. So we do also make sure we include this information here as well for each subcontract. And again, we have a lot of spaces here, so that way we can fit each subcontract in here on this one document. And then again, we give those resources. So if they have anything they need in regards to their subcontracts or any questions, they do have those links that they can go to. And of course, they can always reach out to us, but this also gives them a nice little place that they can go to as well.
Okay, so I'm going to stop for a moment to address the question in the chat. Let me see, I got a couple here. How is faculty effort tracked when faculty want to work during the term but want their pay in the summer? Okay, so that's an interesting question. I'm going to give you that depends question, but I'm also going to answer the way that we typically like to handle it, is that the effort is expended the way it is worked. That is what we try to reinforce to our people, to our PIs. We don't really like to do any of this juggling act between we're going to budget, we're going to allocate it during this period, but you're actually working during this period. That's really not the appropriate way to do it. And I'm going to stop here as a social director and say that it is our responsibility to help our PIs. We want, even though we know that sometimes it's easy to kind of go the route they want to go, but in a lot of cases we have to save them from themselves, because sometimes they don't want to do right by some of their grant funds. And it is our responsibility as research advancement administrators to help them along the way. So we sometimes do have to push back a little bit. But I think the big part of having that positive rapport with them and developing that from the onset is that they will be more open and open to listening, especially when you tell them all the implications. And if you have to go out there and get all types of audit stats and just, scare whatever out of them, just let them know that, we really want to have your effort where you are working, when you are working. So if you're working during the summer, that's when we will allocate it. If you're working during the AY, that's when we'll allocate it. I could go into a whole spiel about the shifting thing, but I don't really have the time right now. But I would basically say we typically try to stay away from having them track their effort doing another one term and paying them during a different term. That's not typically something we would allow. Okay, who on your team completes this form? What would you suggest for departments that don't have a set pre and post award team? Or what would you suggest for departments that only have one person doing pre and post? This form is amazing, but would you be consuming for one person to complete all this for every award or every PI? Well, we do the pre-award, the person that helped them with submit that proposal has responsibilities to complete this form for the most part. Kristen, you can speak to how much time it takes and also how you bring post award in on it. But I will say, it's all about return of investment, right? It may seem like it's a lot of time at the onset, but you have to understand how much time you're saving yourself at the offset, on the after the fact. You're not going to have to go back and reiterate all these things again. So it's worth the investment. Kristen, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, this is the pre-award RA that does fill this out. And when we loop in the post-award RA is actually during the meeting. So we do notify them up front that this has been awarded. So they know a meeting is coming down, down the pipeline. And then we complete this and go over this with them during that meeting. We go over it with the PI, and then the post-award RA is on that meeting as well. To be honest, the form is actually not that time consuming. It does seem like there is a lot in there, but you'll notice with a lot of grants that you may not be filling out every component of the form because you don't always have subawards or consultants and things like that. I would say typically at the longest for me to fill it out, maybe 30 minutes at the most. So it really, and that's even like for like a big NIH grant that we've had awarded. So it is not really truly that time consuming. At least from my perspective, I haven't found it to be time consuming or cumbersome. I mean, really it's just finding the information through the FP and then plugging it in and looking through, the notice of award or the agreement and plugging in the appropriate things. But really, honestly, it hasn't been too time consuming. And I would say the return on investment is probably more valuable than the time that I actually end up putting into the form.
And I will add, because someone asked about if you're the only one doing this, or if you're only one person in your department and those types of things. Well, I came to ASU 5 years ago, and prior to coming here, we didn't have this form. As a matter of fact, I kind of introduced it in a very rudimentary elementary state. And the team, the pre-award team, took this project on with some support from the post-award, but they really made this a robust tool. But prior to coming here, I was a college level research administrator. I was a one-person office doing both pre with some oversight on department level, and I had a form such as this. And I think it's worth your time. If you're one person, this is what's going to give you multiple arms, multiple eyes, multiple ways to support the faculty. So take the time, we're giving you the tool. So take the time to fill it out. You will find that it will be invaluable to you. Your PIs will love you for it. And that's going to decrease your stress level.
Thank you. All right, so the next piece of the form isn't anything you have to fill out. So this is really just information regarding the post-award accounting process for the PI to have those definitely great resources for them as they are in the post-award stage of their grant. Lisa will kind of go over a little bit more detail on the things that we do point out here.
Okay, just addressing the chat, do you update this form during the award period if something changes? We do not. We do not update it during the cycle of the award if anything changes. Typically, there's not much that is changing as a process. Now, I will say that as a process, but that's not to say that each individual post-award team member will not go back to this form. That's not to say the PI won't go back to this form, but if a period of performance changed, and then that's something that's just kind of out there, we know that's happened. The forecasting tool will be updated with those numbers. So everything kind of still falls in sync with each other. So we don't typically come back to this document. Now, if we have situations where a link may change for like purchasing or something like that, we need to update this from time to time. So in order to keep this a form that has some integrity, we do need to review it periodically to make sure the links are still working and there's no new processes. So we will do that. The question is, where do you access the form at ASU? This is not ASU form. This is something that we developed within our college. We are going to make it available to everyone. I think last TURAC or last conference, I think there was a portal where this one wasn't presented, but when I presented at the last conference, all the slides were out there. So this will be where our session is with the presentation, as well as this form. So you can access it out there and download it and put your name on it and go on about your business. Okay. Oh, I did want to go back here. The personnel recruitment and hiring, that's a link that takes them to our intranet site. We do have a website that is pretty robust as well. It breaks down everything. We're revamping it as well now, but we link them to the simple forms to request a hire, to request reimbursement, to request human subjects pay. Everything is hyperlinked, so they can just go there and do what they need to do. Kristen, am I here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So as far as expenditures, post-award side of the house, this is where we would review the budget and talk about allowability, allocability, and any type of changes they need to have made. What will require CHS prior approvals? How do you get a P card? If you want to utilize recharge centers, how's that expense? How's that invoice? We'll talk about that. That's if they have that in their budgets. We'll talk about purchase orders. If they're going to have large purchase order, we want to open up a blanket PO so that make it seamless where we're not paying individual invoices. So we'll talk about that. Look at the procurement process and some of the thresholds, dollar thresholds, and what implications they may have for higher dollar value. There may be sole source justifications and all types of other documents they need to submit. So we want to use this form to also manage expectations. And that means time. Sometimes there's processes that need to play out during the course of setting up some of these vendors and whatnot. So we want to let them know what some of those timelines look like. Also, looking at the federal guidance on procurement, so they know that we're here are not making all this stuff up. You know, that there's actually federal requirements and checklists that we need to be mindful of. If they want to do a again purchase or get reimbursed, we use Adobe Sign for all of our routing documents. So this purchasing power form will actually take them to a form, and they will put in their grant number, their account number. They'll put in what they want to purchase, give the justification. Sometimes they can, copy and paste that from their approved budget justification. They submit that. It'll come to us. It'll route to us for grant manager approval. If it looks in line with the budget and there's no issues, we as RA, the post-award RA, would approve it. Then it goes to our finance department who will do their magic to actually make that purchase and complete the process in our financial management system that will ultimately charge the grant. So there is a nice little paper trail and all that, which has the PI approval, grant management approval, and then finance finishing it up. And we will talk about their subcontracts, how that's all managed, how they will improve the invoices that will come through in Workday. We'll educate them on how to check those out. We will also do a heavy little mini session on, it's your responsibility to monitor these subcontractors and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do on your grant, to make sure they're doing the work and the deliverables before you approve these invoices. If you approve them, that means that you're saying they're doing a good job. And, so if you have any problems, please be mindful of that. And so we want to also make sure they are aware that all invoices need to be approved before their final closeout.
So the next part of this form, we get into closeout. So we just want to note what the expectations are with closeout. So we do want to assure we note what the ASU policy is here, and to assure they know they have to complete that appropriate form and have it to ORSPA within 10 days of receipt. And then we kind of jump into any follow-up required. So during this meeting, if there are any tasks that we do identify, we do note them here, and then who the appropriate person would be for that task. And that way they have a nice little place so they can remember, hey, these are things that I need needed to do, because they may not remember throughout that grant. So this is a place they can go to find any tasks that they need to do as they are working through that grant. And then once we have this full form completed and we've gone over this form with the PI and with the post-award team, then what we do is we actually take the budget, the justification, and the award document, and we send all of that to the PI with this form. And then we do ask the principal investigator to go ahead and sign and date this to acknowledge that we did meet with them today and they do have this document. And that way they also have a copy of this document for themselves. As we've kind of talked quite a bit through this, it's supposed to be a really great resource for the PI to kind of go back to throughout their grant. So that way they can always have this document available to them. So if they need to remember something at a later date, they can just go to this document and where they'll have all of the grant information that would be relevant to the grant. So they get a copy of it. We ask them to sign it. They then sign this and send it back to us. We, as the pre-award RAs, do go ahead and save it into a folder for them. And then the post-award RA will have it as well. And then they have their copy of it. And that is where we keep it. I saw a question earlier that did ask if we did put this in the ERA system. We do not. We just keep it internally for us. And then the PI has their copy.
And I will say that this is probably the most important portion of the form itself, that signature spot, because that really solves a lot of selective amnesia. You know, sometimes that comes across. We want to make sure people say, you know, we did review this with you. Do we know? So no one can come back and say they didn't know. I mean, of course, you know, our goal is that they will use this. We have a lot of conscientious PIs that are really up on it. They do it. And so I'm not meaning to make light of that. I think that I'll even say that to them in a joking way, but they found this to be a very useful tool for them. So, but getting them to sign off on it is a part of accountability. And that's a piece that we want to make sure that we all are, you know, in part to. And the fact that we put it out there, that's our accountability. So I will go over and talk about some, how are we for time? Okay. Talk about some of the challenges of poor no dissemination. I mean, you guys are probably already, you know, either feeling it or experiencing it or no, but prior to implementing this, I will say there was a lot of confusion on everyone's part as to what's going on and moving parts doing. There can be so much non-compliance during the course of this grant, non-compliance in the life cycle. The PIs are going ahead and reducing their effort and then coming back later talking about, oh, you know, I know it said I was putting in 10%, but I was only really doing 5% or something like that, or 2% or something, you know. So we want to educate the onset so they don't do that. And you know, any unallowable expenditures, we have a really, I think, a good, robust system that we catch any of that stuff, but it doesn't mean that they won't go out there and, you know, try to put some things out there that they think that's appropriate, but it's not. So we want to talk about, hey, let's stick to the budget. If there's something that you feel that you need that's not there, let's talk about it first before you go out and make any commitments to vendors and whatnot. Return of funding to sponsor. We know that unallowable expenses, if we come back during an audit situation, we may have to kick that back. Problems with closeout, maybe the cost share is not being tracked or not managed well. Late progress reports because we haven't talked about deliverables up front and what their responsibilities are, and signing off and acknowledge that they're going to be on top of those. Some of the deliverables not met or not on time. Obviously, that's some things that we need to be mindful of. And then obviously we have potential loss or hold of funding to the entire institution. I know some of you, I know I've seen some of those emails come through. Oh, this progress report is late from the sponsor. We're may have to hold off, and this may jeopardize your entire institution getting funding. So we don't like those messages. So we hope to mitigate that by having this in place. And what are some of the successes of proper dissemination? Oh, it's a joy. Okay, open communication, willingness to engage each other during the life cycle of the grant. It builds rapport. It builds positive regard for one another. I'm not going to say we don't have, you know, hiccups, or we don't have some that don't get upset at times. I'm not trying to paint that picture now, but I will say it does help in the majority of the situations. Smoother programmatic operations. Everyone is informed of any sticky points in advance, so we can comply. And project and a PI and the project personnel are knowledgeable about resources that are available to them. If we have it out there, we try to make sure that they are aware. So we want to decrease that administrative burden. That's what we're here, right? That's what we're here for. So decreasing their administrative burden, so they're not hunting for things. You know, I try to put myself, and you all as well, in the PI's position. You know, if they're having to focus on research, yet they're trying to hunt for things, or they don't know where to go, or they're confused or whatever, that just increases their stress level. They're going to give it to us, and then it's a vicious cycle. So, and lots of times it's not really, you know, their fault. You know, we have to give them some kind of grace on that and understand that typically conflict happens when there is an unmet need. So we need to figure out what those needs are and how can we help them address it. Build trust and strong relationship and a culture of support. That's really what it boils down to. And as long as we have adequate staffing, and I think that's a big piece, is that when you build a rapport, we all across the, you know, research administration across, you know, the U.S. and institutions oftentimes are having challenges of staffing situations and delays and those types of things. But when you develop that good rapport with the PI, there's a little bit more grace and understanding. So I think that's the big piece that I really want to impart with you. So we're going to go into some scenarios, and you guys are going to have to put some things in the chat here. Faculty reduce, this is for first scenario. I think I had this one, Kristen. You get the next one. Is that it? Or how do we go?
That's fine.
Okay. Faculty reduce ever from 25 to 4% and certify this on a progress report. Is this an issue? If yes, why?
So if you can go ahead and use the chat and chat some of your answers in there, and we'll read a couple of them off and then discuss a little further.
Angela, while they're doing that, what is our time again?
The session ends at 10:50.
Okay.
So
we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have some answers. We have, yes, it is an issue. You are absolutely correct. It is an issue. We did have one that says, yes, it is an issue, and asking like, why did they reduce their efforts so much? So you guys are definitely correct. It is an issue. And it is an issue because at this point, we know for like a budget revision would be required for this because they are reducing it more than 25%. And now they certified on our progress report that this is their effort and no budget revision was done.
Mm-hmm. And we need to notify the sponsor ASAP if we see that there's going to be an issue with them meeting their required time commitments. If we do it after the fact, then there's all types of integrity issues that come into play for the sponsor. Are you even able to do this? We told you at the onset that you need to get approval or let us know and inform us. So we want to be mindful of that. And next one, we're going to go ahead to the next one since we're running.
So the next one is capital equipment purchased with the grant. The PI verbally promised the equipment to the vendor. Agreement stated that institution owns the equipment. Inventory control says, no, no, no. What are the potential impacts?
I think we didn't get anything, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about it. I think for me, I think the major impact is your rapport with whoever you're promising that that equipment to. They're not gonna be too happy with you when we tell you, you can't give that away. You know, they're not gonna be too happy. But that's why we talk about this at the onset. Who owns the equipment after the fact? So we don't want any misunderstandings. And again, like I said, that could be a laptop, depending upon the sponsor. They may say that the laptop is equipment in their eyes and they want it. Or they may say, you know, it belongs to the institution, and you can act accordingly. But that's one. Kristen, you have any others? Potential impact? Okay, PI. Oh, I'm sorry, we got some coming in. The PI has obligated the college to the vendor. Yes, that's a great response. PI cannot commit the university. Vendor will be angry, but that's the law. Yes, exactly.
And the other piece to do with this is if this is federal funds, there are very specific requirements when it comes to purchasing equipment with federal funds, disposition requirements and things like that. And so we could not guarantee this through the law as well. So that could definitely be an issue. And
yeah, that's those are the biggies is the law. We want to abide by those. All right. The unnamed foreign consultant, what are the potential impacts? Oops, I have one. The egg is on the PI's face, but vendors don't differentiate. It makes the cause look bad. but would be worse for the cost to not follow the law. Yeah, I love that comment. Absolutely. That captures it all pretty nicely. So we got next, we got unnamed foreign consultant. What are the potential impacts? Yes, it could trigger import export issues for sure. Right off the bat there, hit the home run. Anything else? It definitely could, if you're dependent upon that person, that data sharing issues for sure. Yep, that's a biggie. I think in all of our situations, we're, especially on the pre-award side of the house, we're not going to go in it with unnamed people. Particularly in those areas, we really try to have them to give us who they're planning to work with, so that we can be in total compliance. I do see other comments here. Possible budget concern if that was not in the budget. Absolutely. Not complying with the FAR for sure. Federal funds going to the foreign consultant is problematic if their needs can be met domestically. Oh, I love that one. Absolutely. That's great. Very good feedback. You guys are right on it. Right on it. So we don't have to go into further discussion. You done covered it all. Very good.
Home run right there.
Yeah. So when you get this PowerPoint, there will be some hyperlinks for you to go in and look at troublesome clauses. We're gonna double check and make sure that the new award portfolio template is updated and in its place. I think it is, but I'm not sure if I double check that. So we might not have the actual document there, but go to the end of this PowerPoint when you see it, and it should be able to open you up to an open drive, so you can download the documents and also look at some of these other resources. Any other questions or concerns or feedback? We made it in time. And with that said, Angela, you want to close us out with the
Yes,
housekeeping?
of course. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. That was great. Lisa and Kristen, that was great information. Just want to remind everyone about the survey that should be coming your way as soon as you close out the window. And the resources and the PowerPoint will be available within a few days on our website, on the conference website. And that does it for this talk. Thank you, everyone. I hope you continue to.
I want to thank Angela for monitoring and moderating for us. Thank you so much for your help.
Of course.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great rest of the day. I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the talks today.